up? We are live. Welcome to another edition of Bunker Office Hours, a weekly podcast brought to you by Team at Bunker Labs, a national network of veteran military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping our ecosystem start and grow their own businesses. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, coming to you from Las Vegas, Nevada, joined by my co-host, Amy Morrison, and our special guest today, the one and only, my friend, mentor, fellow confidant, Mr. Todd Connor, founder of Bunker Labs and the CEO of Veterans for Political of Innovation. Todd and Amy, what's going on?
Howdy.
Guys, so good to see you guys. My heart is full. And in case people are thinking I'm not dead. I'm still here. You just don't see
around.
me. I'm around. I'm not kicking down doors at Bunker Labs, not in the same way at least. Although we did this weekend at the Military Influencer Conference. That was pretty cool.
We did.
And you'll be at CEO Circle too.
Well, absolutely. That's true. You're right. Thank you, Amy.
What's up?
We're going to be in New York City next week.
Ted says, echoing Mike's thoughts and sentiments. And I'll tell y'all, so we're coming off the high of the Military Influencer Conference. I'm still here in Vegas. My girlfriend and her family are out here. So we're spending some time, which is great. But I'll tell you, everyone stopped me at the conference. Mike, I love your podcast. I watch it every Tuesday. I was like, my podcast on Tuesday? I was like, that's office hours. And I was texting Amy and the team, like, everybody calls office hours a podcast, so it's official. We're gonna go ahead and make it a podcast.
Five podcasts. Yeah.
So
I see some of these names popping in. Good morning, Andrew and Joe and Ted and Elijah and Frank. Awesome. I love it.
All your people are coming in. So Todd, give us a quick rundown of what you thought of Mick, as someone who's been in the ecosystem from the very beginning.
Yeah. So MIC is the Military Influencer Conference put on by We Are the Mighty. And I think it's kind of a collaboration between the Military Influencer Conference, which is Cortez Riggs, founder of that. I think you want to call them an organization or movement or, but definitely a brand. So Cortez Riggs built the Military Influencer Conference. We Are the Mighty is led by Mark Harper. Just outstanding individuals with a vision for building content and platforms to kind of elevate the military community and tell like what I would describe as authentic stories and create authentic opportunities amidst an authentic community. So that's my language, not theirs, but I think this was this the third or the fourth? We had a reprieve during COVID and we were back together live in Las Vegas, and the Bunker Labs had a kind of a huge activation within the Military Influencer Conference. And so there was probably, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but probably about 1,000 folks, a couple hundred specifically there with Bunker Labs. Really inspiring. I was like, I had this feeling, and I say this a lot coming out of Bunker Labs events, just gratifying exhaustion. Like, I am physically exhausted. I have nothing left to give. I need to like sit in a cold, dark room for, 3 hours with no chatter, with no phones. But like deeply gratified, like, because it's like you've felt it all. And so I think just being in that community, being amongst people I love, this is what we were chatting on before the show. Fantastic, phenomenally delivered event. I was, happy to, grateful to play a small role in that. Just, it was a great event. We need more of it, more things like it.
Yeah, I don't use the term friends very loosely, but I got so many friends in this ecosystem. Todd, I've been around for 5 years at this point now. And so you start to build up memories. We've been through a pandemic together. You know what I mean? We all been through it. And so when we're able to come together and break bread and fellowship, it's just awesome. It's all love. There's so many people I've had on this platform. My man, Michael Persinger from Canada, right? He's on every office hours, every week. And I not only get to hang out with him at MIC, we also got to shoot guns and smoke cigars this past Saturday. And like, that's what it means to get in person. And I, for one, am going to do a better job of getting out and about, getting away from these computer screens and actually fellowshipping with people, because, man, life is too short. Relationships are the most important thing, I think. And I'm looking to get out there and really cultivate them. So, I mean, if you guys weren't at MIC, man, you got to come to these events. I think we got MilVet Startup Conference. It's going to be another conference coming up in February. Come out, fellowship, man. It's so much fun. And be around your peers, because that's what it's all about.
It's so important. So, and can I say this too, which is on Monday, We'll be in, or Sunday, we'll be in New York City for CEO Circle with Bunker Labs. And we have an outgoing cohort that's been together for a year of 40 entrepreneurs, 40 people running their businesses. And there's a cohort of 70 coming in. And these are folks that, like when you're running your own business and when you get out of the military, those are two isolating factors, right? Where you're like, I'm out of a corporate hub of, kind of connectivity of community of peers. And I'm also out of the military. And so I'm super just excited for that, because I hope that the legacy of Bunker Labs, and even through things like office hours and showing up at the ambassador or being an ambassador, a volunteer leader for a period of time, or being in one of our programs like the VIR, that we have like hopefully supercharged small communities of 10, 20, 30, 50 people that like have a really intense experience and hopefully stay connected in some way. And I think, at the end of the day, I think the Bunker isn't so much about like a national organization. It's about 100 micro communities that have been launched. And it's okay if people move on, and it's actually okay if people even forget that they were involved with Bunker Labs, as long as those relationships, stay strong. And I think I don't know. That's something that I hope is true. I hope is the legacy of this work.
100%, man. So many people were thankful for coming on this show, coming on the podcast, just being highlighted, and they were telling the stories of what follow-on things this has led to. Someone watches an office hours interview or listens to a podcast, and then next thing you know, they're shooting a video for them. They're saying, hey, I want to support you. And they were just so thankful and appreciative of the platform that we're building at Bunker. It's been hard, Todd. It ain't been easy. We're still learning and growing and trying to meet the needs for a bunch of different groups, right? We got our military spouses. We got underserved minorities. We got tech startups, small businesses. But we're doing our best, and I felt a lot of love from people for appreciating what we're doing, which was great. So, Amy, I'm going to pass it over. Any announcements before we talk about Veterans Day?
Yep. Real quick, a couple things. So we got our Veterans Day blog is up, so you can learn about all the things happening in the Bunker Labs community on and around Veterans Day, which is next week. So that's on the blog. And then also our Bunker Labs holiday gift guide has been released, and it features 60 products from veterans and military spouse-owned businesses in the Bunker Labs community. And a lot of them are offering a 20% bunker discount. So you can check that out at bunkerlabs.org/marketplace-2022. And then also just real quick, next week we are not having office hours because it's election day and y'all need to go vote, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we're coming back on the 15th to talk more about the holiday gift guide. So that's it.
Appreciate it, Amy. All right. Now, I know this is probably hard for Todd when people say, Todd, what is it you do?
Thanks,
right.
Amy.
And I got my little bio sheet here. I'm going to read for him real quick. But for those of you who do not know, Todd Connor is the owner of LaPorte Small Business, Emerson House, and lives in Porter County with his husband and 2-year-old son. He is currently the CEO of Veterans for Political Innovation, an organization he co-founded to make our political system less toxic and more competitive by mobilizing military veterans to fight to preserve democracy through election innovations. In 2014, Todd also founded Bunker Labs, a national entrepreneurship organization dedicated to helping military veterans and spouses start and grow our businesses. Todd holds a BA from Northwestern University and an MBA from the University of Chicago, and he is also the author of Third Shift Entrepreneur. And if I'm not mistaken, you're also a professor now, is it associate professor, whatever it is, teaching social entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago. Did I get that right?
You got it, bud. Yeah, no. And
all right.
Yeah, thank you.
What's your one-liner? So when people say, Todd, what is it you do? What do you usually tell people?
Well, what I'm doing right now is trying to fix American democracy before it's too late, is the mission I am on right now. I think I answer the question of what do you do in terms of kind of like the mission I'm after as opposed to the title that I hold. And I would guess, and maybe we can go, let's do a poll. In the chat, how many projects are you currently cultivating? And I would be, I'm going to guess it's, for most people, it's at least 2. that we've got like maybe a day job and a side hustle. Maybe we're exploring something in our lives. If you have multiple things going on, go to the chat and just kind of let me know how many things you're pursuing. Mike, you and I have had this conversation lots of times. And so I know that if you're listening to this, you're wired for ideas. And I would say at any given time, I've probably got 3 or 4 or 5 things that I'm cultivating. 1 or 2 of those things will never go anywhere. Maybe one of those things is going to like be a rocket ship, and then 1 or 2 might be a hobby or a sort of a passion project that doesn't, sort of lives in between. There's a whole, people think it's like there's successes and failures. That's like way overly simplistic. I think there's cultivation of ideas. There's a realization it doesn't maybe have legs, and there's like a sunsetting, and it wasn't really a success, and it definitely wasn't a failure, And so for me, what's priority is doing this work around restoring our political system, and I'm still deeply passionate about obviously Bunker Labs. I'm still doing work with the George W. Bush Institute. I'm serving as this entrepreneur in residence at the University of Chicago, and I feel like, Mike, and I think you would share this sentiment, that you have a choice when you've notched a couple wins in your life. And by the way, everyone on this call has notched a couple wins. And the question is like, do you coast and do you just go like into accrual mode? Like, hey, I did good, therefore give me more. Or do you ask yourself, how do I spend whatever I've accrued towards like whatever is my highest and best next purpose? Recognizing that there comes privilege with having achieved anything and or achieve flexibility, that like we have a choice. Like we have a choice. It's like, again, like coast, spend what we've got, or accrue more, or deploy what we've done and earned towards the next mission. And so I'm definitely in this season of, having had, the time with the Bunker Labs, which has always been deeply gratifying, and feeling like the distinctive contribution that I can make is maybe waning a little bit vis-a-vis the talented team, you, Blake, Amy, like others that are involved. And then I said, well, what is someone like me needed to do right now? And also, what am I passionate about? And I looked at the American political system and said, man, this thing is not built to last if we don't create interventions. And so I've been all in on that question for 3 years, and also raising a 2.5-year-old little guy. Not so little. He was a dinosaur last night for trick-or-treating. We can talk about that. But ultimately, like on this journey of like, what's the highest and best use of my time, networks, reputation, whatever I've got, and really feel like it's got to be around election reform as a way to stabilize American democracy. So that's the entering salvo. We can talk more about what Veterans for Political Innovation is, but I think that's a little bit of like the life journey to this moment, is saying, I'm going to go do something that feels reputationally risky, because it's like, what are you doing? Starting all over? It's like, yeah, kind of, but for a different purpose and for a mission that needs to get done. And so that's what we're doing.
Love it. And with Veterans Day coming up, what does Veterans Day mean to you? And why are you all, obviously, other than being veterans, what do you think veterans bring to the political system that other groups don't necessarily have? What's that tactical advantage that you guys are trying to leverage through VPI?
Yeah. So the tactical advantage is Americans trust veterans. That's a big deal. It's like 49% of Americans. No, I'm sorry. I think the trust ratio, Eric Bronner's my co-founder, really the founder, and he can maybe he can chime in on the exact data, but Americans trust veterans disproportionately to other communities. Americans don't trust a lot of things. I mean, they've never trusted politicians. So they don't trust politicians. They don't trust Congress. They sometimes trust their congressperson who represents them. But even like lately, they don't trust public health officials. They don't trust teachers. They don't trust principals. They don't trust faith leaders. So trust is cratering in this country, but Americans still trust. There's two groups they trust, have continued to trust, or trust even more, and that is military veterans, and that is small business owners, which is super interesting. And they also trust their employer, and even if that's large corporate, they kind of trust their employer, they trust small business owners, they trust veterans. So that raises the stakes. If you say like, well, gosh, Americans still trust veterans and small business owners, that raises the stakes for us to say, if people trust us, what are the messages that we're putting out right now to either earn that trust and guide them thoughtfully towards like a future that is healthy and that is, democratic, or are we going to exploit that? And we see that. Are we going to weaponize that trust towards anger and hatred and like false solutions, which veterans can do if they choose to, or are we going to like sit it out and not use our voice? Those are kind of the options as I see it. It's like weaponize it, sit it out, or deploy it towards what we think is something productive. And so it's important that we think hard about our obligation as veterans, and are thoughtful about how do we use that brand while the trust is still there. That trust is waning. 28% of people that are running for office that deny the outcome of the 2020 election against all evidence. Let's just be clear. That is not a partisan comment. If you hear that as partisan, you're in the wrong information networks. 28% of them are veterans. And so we're not always going to have the trust, and I'm not sure we always deserve the trust. But we have it. And so how do we use it for productive uses, productive outcomes? And that to me isn't partisan. It's like, it's not about actually achieving partisan aims. It's about achieving structural reforms. And so that's a big thing that we have to do right now. The other thing that with the military communities, people are pretty disconnected from what kind of happens to make this country work. We're pretty disconnected from that. And cable news has kind of put us into echo chambers, both sides. People are pretty disconnected from national service. We had moments like 9/11 that we felt connected, but those moments are, waning. We don't have wide participation in the military. So people don't actually understand in a lot of levels, like what's going on in this country. And I think military folks have worked inside of the federal government, have oftentimes been overseas, have an appreciation for kind of the systems of government that matter, have an appreciation for the diversity of this country. And so anyway, I think what we find is like, this is a waning perspective. The other thing that I'll say, being 44, is, it's like you get to the point where you think some adult's going to fix this. And then you're like, no adult's going to fix this. No one that's currently been in office for years and years and years is going to fix this. So we, the citizens, we, the people, have a role to play. And I just take that role deadly serious, that we have to figure out what is going to move us forward. And if the answer to how you move us forward is our team just needs to win the next time, that is like the wrong, false answer. The right solution involves like some give and take. Otherwise, we're just kind of into like a win at all costs kind of scenario, and that cannot be the answer. So now I'm blabbing, Mike, but that's your question was why veterans, and that's why.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Todd, I'm part of the Hoover Veteran Fellowship Program at Stanford University's Hoover Institute. And one of the reasons that program was created, because they know a lot of veterans are practitioners, right? We're in the trenches. Like you said, you named all these different side projects. People are working full-time jobs and trying to work on the wildfires. They're trying to work on sex trafficking. We're trying to work on inner city youth in Newark. And I do think we bring this tactical advantage. The other thing I tell people of, I used to always hate it when I was at the Naval Academy, and they'd be like, you guys must be military. You're out in town just trying to blend in. And it's like, how did you guys guess? And it's like, well, he's Filipino, he's Latino, you're African-American, he's Caucasian, he's got a cowboy hat on. Most of the time, you don't see these diverse groups walking out, hanging, chopping it up. But the military forces us all to kind of come together. So at the very least, we have empathy and understanding with one another. Sadly, when we leave the military, we can lose that. But for the most part, right, that's something that we have that a lot of America doesn't. Because I definitely remember joining the military, and there were people who had never seen an African-American before until, you're in a unit together. And so these are things that we can bring, and I'm excited to learn more about. When you think of innovation in this space, a lot of times people talk tech. What does innovation mean specifically to you all, and how are you approaching it?
Oh, it's a great question, because the headline for Dan Eric and I, is Veterans for Political Innovation. And here's the thing: if you forget politics for a second, if you can just tune out politics, the two-party system, in other words, don't have a political opinion as I say these things. Like, forget what team you're on for a second. The political industrial complex, of which I participate. I've run for office. I vote. I voted early. Like, I'm identified as being on one of the teams, like all that. But this political industrial complex is a soft two-party duopoly. If you read Michael Porter and Catherine Gale, Michael Porter out of Harvard Business School, author, architect of Porter's Five Forces, he's the godfather of competitive strategy, and he's on lots of corporate boards. And if you have an MBA, you've read Michael Porter, and you understand Porter's Five Forces. And basically, it says like a competitive, healthy marketplace constitutes 5 forces that sort of come into play. And if you look at the political marketplace, it's a two-party duopoly, the two-company duopoly, without any of the competitive forces that are required to create a healthy marketplace. And the reason monopolies and duopolies are illegal is because it allows for price fixing and hurts consumers. That's fundamentally why monopolies are either illegal or regulated. Monopolies and duopolies, because the trick with duopolies is like duopolies can go into collusion and like raise prices and still kind of everyone suffers. And so if you look at, so we're talking about business strategy for a second. So if you look at Coke and Pepsi in the 90s, they led, if you were alive in the 90s, they led with negative advertising because they were operating on the theory that everyone's going to drink soda. And it's only a question of whether it's Pepsi or if it's Coke. And so they led with negative advertising. And you think it's like, how ridiculous is that? Well, as soon as flavored water showed up, or things that, or people began to make health choices like maybe I don't even want to drink cola, then that ceased to be a smart strategy because they're like, oh, actually, we might be destroying ourselves while people are just like off ramping from this entire two option decision model, right? And so they stopped. Now it would be ridiculous for them to lead with the negative advertising because people have so many choices. They'd only be hurting themselves. So that's what happens when you only have 2 options. And so you think about this. You think about just this is a marketplace problem, and you go, okay, well, what would a healthy marketplace look like? It would look like more options. It would look like more people participating. It would look like more voter preferences being expressed. And you can get there, but this is the intellectual journey I've been on, and Eric and Dan and I have been reading and studying and looking at other foreign governments and how do other countries do this, how do other states do this. You can get to a competitive marketplace if you open primaries and allow everyone to vote in primaries, regardless of their political affiliation. And then if you have a ranked choice election in the general election. So instead of, when you go to the vote in the general election, you'd see 5 choices instead of 2 choices. You might see 5 choices, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, right? And then you vote and rank the order in which you like those candidates. It's how the Oscars get decided. It's how corporate boards make decisions. Ranked choice voting is not new. It's not crazy. It's what Robert's Rules of Order recommends for how we make decisions in a complex environment, because you want to get to a consensus. That's the whole point, right? As opposed to, well, I won 18% and you won 16%, therefore I'm the winner, even though 18% of people picked me. So we have all kinds of structural challenges to this, but I'm tired of looking at the political system, and the conditioning that we're all kind of in is like, don't think about the environment, just stay outraged and then give us all your money so that we can win the next election. And all that does is feed this kind of duopoly, and we all do it. And I get text messages all day long because I give money to candidates. And so so you have to kind of pull the ripcord and say, like, how do we get out of this cycle that continues to degrade us and abuse us? And the answer is election reform. You can do election reform state by state. And so Alaska has the model that I'm talking about. Alaska also has a U.S. Senate candidate who's a Republican, Lisa Murkowski, who has endorsed a Democrat. And you have a Democrat who's endorsed a Republican. So you're starting to see, like, if you want an example of how do we end polarization, look at Alaska. It's happening in real time. So I don't want to drone on because that's not necessarily why people are on this call, is to learn about election reform. But I'm passionate. There is a path out for America. It involves technical reforms. It involves doing that at the state level. And that's the organization that we're building nationwide, Veterans for Political Innovation.
Well, I'm just watching the chat here and it's going off, right? So clearly, this is a conversation that people are energized by. And we only have so much time here on office hours, but we definitely got to get you on another podcast to really talk about, because I think there are a lot of veterans that want to do more social entrepreneurship, right? It's not just about the monetary returns. And obviously, we need money, we need cash. We got to maintain cash flow. It's real.
Right.
But I think people are inspired by looking at ways people are leveraging business and innovation to create real social and economic change. And so looking forward to having a deep dive on that. And I've had you guys on Confession of a Native Son. Apologize, I haven't released that episode yet, but I will. So we'll have a great way to keep this conversation going. In the meantime, though, I've got to shift to our book recommendation because Carrie behind the scenes is going to crap the whip on me. Todd, what book recommendation do you have for our viewers today?
I'll give you two. I gave you one earlier, which is I'm gonna make sure I get the name. I always get it wrong. So Nassim Skin in the Game is the name of the book. Hidden Asymmetries of Daily Life. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who also wrote Black Swan and some other extraordinary books. Great author. And the punchline on Skin in the Game is there's a lot of folks that are trading on upside while shielding themselves from downside. So the classic is mortgage-backed securities, right? Banks exploit that, make tons of money on that. It goes south, the government bails them out. And basically, he basically makes an argument that is like number one, unethical, but that you don't actually live in the reality. You actually haven't earned the upside. So Skin in the Game is all about how you grow and develop and actually create real returns for yourselves based on actually having skin in the game. There's two quotes I'll give from the book. He says, "You will never fully convince someone that he is wrong. Only reality can." And he says, Too many people are not convinced yet of their own fallibility because they never actually learned the real lessons. And bureaucracy is a construction by which a person is conveniently separated from the consequences of his or her actions. So it's a clarion call to this idea of man in the arena, woman in the arena, which I think we all kind of understand. And he basically does some truth telling on people that present as like, I'm a bold risk taker, but it's like actually when it's all said and done, like they always get paid, they always land safely, and that's not actually having skin in the game. I'll give you one more book recommendation, which is David Rubenstein, How to Invest. Fascinating book. I'm not a finance guy. David Rubenstein actually was in politics and then pivoted and built one of the largest private equity firms in the country. Is it KKR or Carlyle Group? Someone correct me. Anyway, built an enormous private equity firm. And he interviews world-class investors about how they think about investing. And it's a really interesting book on how to invest. And anyway, so there's philosophies of famous investors that he gets into. And one of the things that's interesting, and this gets back to your point, Mike, about social entrepreneurship, all these people who have made boatloads of money, at the end of the day, they all become philanthropists because that's the only next thing that you can do. And so he introduces everyone as, real estate investor and philanthropist. And so it's important actually, like, even if your goal is to build a successful, business that you exit and make boatloads of money, all of us at some point, I think the privilege of success is the opportunity to pursue the next important question, right? The next opportunity for impact. And so it's a look into how people think about philanthropy as well as how they invest.
Love it. Well, I want to make sure I only got like a minute left, and Carrie, I know Carrie's ready. Y'all don't understand behind the scenes. Got a whole situation going on. But here's what I want to say. I was going to plug my book today, Build, but I'm going to wait till next week. The next office hour should do it because I want to plug Todd's book, Third Shift Entrepreneur. And here's why. When I started Ironbound Boxing, I was a third shift entrepreneur. I was working a full-time job. I was going to grad school. I was straight hustling. And in Newark, we have a saying that Newark is for hustlers. And that third shift mentality is what allowed me to transition into being a full-time entrepreneur. And so I want to thank you for allowing me to write the introduction to that book. And I want to encourage those of you tuning in to make sure you read Third Shift Entrepreneur. And let's leave Todd a review on Amazon. because those are helpful. And again, when we have people from our community understand the unique challenges we bring, because a lot of veteran entrepreneurs, we can't afford to be sleeping on couches. We're not 22 years old. People have families, they have mortgages. And so while there's this whole entrepreneurship industry out there, the reality is it looks a little different for a lot of you all tuning in. So please check out Third Shift Entrepreneur. Additionally, I want to thank Todd for coming on the podcast today. How can people find out and support Veterans for Political Innovation?
Thanks, Mike. Great always being with you. I'm so grateful for you, and just our friendship means the world to me. Yeah, and thanks for the book plug on Third Shift Entrepreneur. I think that's what a lot of folks on this Zoom are doing is hustling out there as third shift entrepreneurs. It's something that I am a third shift entrepreneur still. So to get involved with Veterans for Political Innovation, there's the chat. It's right there, veteransforpoliticalinnovation.org. Get in touch with me or Eric. Find us on LinkedIn or Dan. They're in the chat as well with some links. And so, yeah, we need you in this mission. We've got about 30 states represented. What we really want as a near-term target is all 50 states represented with at least one veteran or military spouse, identified of hey, I'm in Idaho and I support these things, because that helps us elevate and tell a national story about our breadth. So get involved, look at there's an onboarding process. It's pretty quick, but get on board with us and then join our monthly calls. And then we just start the conversation. It's low lift, but if you're yep, I think there's a path out, I support some reform, join us, and then we that'll help us get another state on the board. I'm trying to get all 50 states in the next 6 months.
We appreciate you, Todd. Bunker Labs wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you, and the fact that you're still around, provide insight, sharing knowledge, we truly appreciate it. And I got to thank our virtual event sponsors, MetLife Foundation, not only for office hours, but for the transition as well. The reason these podcasts exist is because they're gracious support, and we're so happy to have them supporting us for another year and hopefully beyond. So thank you, MetLife Foundation, for creating these platforms for the community. If you haven't done so already, head over to bunkerlabs.org, get plugged in, sign up for the newsletter. We got programs that take you from idea to invoice, incubate you, and position you to grow alongside other founders and CEOs. And also subscribe to the Transition Podcast. We're dropping amazing episodes, elevating these amazing entrepreneurs in our ecosystem. And so make sure you're listening, because I don't want you falling into the hustle porn trap. All the stuff out there, TechCrunch, Fast Company, that's great. But again, we bring a unique perspective, and we all have a unique journey navigating this entrepreneurial ecosystem. So tune into the Transition Podcast for that. Until next week, everyone, peace, love, and have a great rest of your week.